the article is a remnant of dictatorial regimes that wished to use this article as a tool for political engineering and that wished to control political parties by amputating popular political leaders from their political parties. So I think this article, it's a remnant of dictatorial regimes, and this article was a classical tool in the it was a classical tool available to dictatorial regimes to change political loyalties and to stifle democratic movements and democratic political parties. Well, as far as Article 62(1)(f) and its language is concerned, it says that a person has to be honest and ameen. This provision in Article 62(1)(f) was also incorporated and introduced during the Zia regime. So unsurprisingly, the Zia regime that frequently used Islam to legitimize their illegal, unlawful, and illegitimate regime, they used Islam to legitimize their regime, and Article 62(1)(f) served two purposes. One, it was part of the regime's Islamization process, and more importantly and more critically, it allowed the regime to control political parties by using these vague terms against prominent and popular political leaders. Now, as far as the meaning of these provisions is concerned, or as far as the meaning of these words is concerned, the Supreme Court has time and again tried to explain what these two words mean, what these two words entail. But we've also seen that the Supreme Court's own jurisprudence in respect of Article 62(1)(f) has been inconsistent. So, for instance, we see that in the case of Sheikh Rashid, Justice Qazi Faiz Isa, in his dissenting note at that time, had held that if we apply the standards that would apply to Nawaz Sharif, then Sheikh Rashid should also be disqualified. Similarly, there were arguments and allegations that the standard that was used in Panama was not applied to Imran Khan's case subsequently, and the court was perhaps more magnanimous in their treatment of Imran Khan. So I think one of the critiques of Article 62(1)(f) is that because the words and the language of the article is so vague and so overbroad, it allows the courts to fill in those gaps. And as a result, you then see critiques of the court's role while interpreting Article 62(1)(f). Now, while I don't think we should absolve the court of all responsibility, while I think that while Article 62(1)(f) has been used by dictatorial regimes to control political parties, the courts have also supported this endeavor. Having said that, I would not blame the court as much because our prominent political parties, all major political parties, had the chance of amending Article 62(1)(f) during the 18th Amendment. And while Article 62(1)(f) was amended to include that only a court of competent jurisdiction can declare a person to be to fall short of the requirements of Article 62(1)(f), the article was not completely dispensed with. So I think our politicians usually have a history of missing the forest for the trees, and their failure to amend Article 62(1)(f) in a manner that precluded or that would have precluded and obviated the possibility of this article being used against them, I think that opportunity was missed during the 18th Amendment. Well, there are different instances in which people have approached the courts and argued that a person is not honest in terms of Article 62(1)(f). The one obvious example is that if the nomination papers that you submit to the Election Commission of Pakistan, if there's a material misrepresentation in those nomination papers. So, for instance, in the case of Faisal Vawda, it was established, or it was the argument of those who had challenged his election, that because he had given an affidavit stating that he was not a foreign national while submitting his nomination papers, because that affidavit was false, as a result, he was proven to be lying under oath. Similarly, in the case of Nawaz Sharif, the court held that because he had failed to declare an income receivable, as a result, he had concealed his assets, and as a result, he fell short of the requirements of Article 62(1)(f). But there have also been certain judgments where the court, for instance, talked about making an innocent mistake and about making a misrepresentation that was not material. But then again, there are critiques of where such exceptions are allowed and where such exceptions are not allowed. So I think the jurisprudence with respect to Article 62(1)(f) remains convoluted, and the major reason for the jurisprudence with respect to Article 62(1)(f) being as vague is because the article itself puts the courts in an unenviable position. I don't think the problem is not having a yardstick. I think the problem is having different yardsticks for different political parties and different politicians. And I think that's the crux of the criticism of the jurisprudence with respect to Article 62(1)(f). Whereas in certain other cases, we see that the court is willing to overlook such omissions. So I believe while there has been a yardstick, the manner in which the yardstick is applied in different cases remains it's for all to see. And I think the main critique of the court's jurisprudence is that there is no consistent yardstick. So I think the lack of consistency is a major problem over here. While we often blame the courts for their inconsistent jurisprudence with respect to Article 62(1)(f), I think the major blame rests on politicians and the parliament, because it is the parliament's responsibility to address the lacunas in Article 62(1)(f). And I believe that while I would not read too much into the Chief Justice's remarks, because at the end of the day, they're only remarks. It's not a substantive judgment. But I believe this may be a sign to the parliament that if the parliament should choose to amend Article 62(1)(f), the court would perhaps not interfere, and the court would perhaps not be inclined to rule that such amendment is inconsistent with the basic structure of the Constitution.